Hi and welcome to this week's review, looking at the fundamentals first, actually, for a change. This seems very light. We're very light on fundamentals this week, partly because on Thursday we've got the US bank holiday, Thanksgiving, which often runs into Friday, although there are some figures coming out, but generally just running through the fundamentals for the week first, very briefly. There's very little out today. We've got Draghi speaking at 4 o'clock, which could create some volatility, as he is due to testify about the European Central Bank's annual report. Now, we could hear more about whether he's questioned or not properly. The Q&A, we could hear whether he's going to be looking to continue with the financial easing. Aside of that, tomorrow, really CAD retail sales. That's the sort of biggest figure I'm looking at here at the moment, which is a very low key affair, 1:30 p.m. Then Wednesday, there's a lot more data coming out. We've got the French and German flash and services PMI coming out. So it's flash manufacturing and services PMI coming out Wednesday at 8 and 8:30 respectively, and then finally we get the 9 o'clock figure for the whole of Europe. But it's the 8 and 8:30 ones that generally give a bit more of a boost to the euro, or not, as the case may be. In the US, we've got the core durable goods on Wednesday at 1:30, which is a bit of a variable one anyway, doesn't tend to move too much. Crude oil inventories on Wednesday as well at 3:30, so that one may be a little bit more of a mover. If you're into the late evening, there's the FOMC meeting at meetings minutes rather at 7 p.m. So a bit of late news on Wednesday there, something to read and just get a bit more of a feel for what they were actually saying behind the closed doors. As I said, Thursday, very little coming out there and no significant data. We've got the German IFO business climate coming out, but it generally barely causes a blip on the market. And then Friday, we've got the UK's second estimate of GDP. Now, bearing in mind the beans, there's too few, not that many beans to count. They generally get it pretty right on the first attempt. So this week, as I say, remains pretty quiet. So let's have a look at the technicals. And we'll start with the euro as ever. From a weekly point of view, we've set up a weekly pivot swing. That's a 3-candle pattern sitting there. Looks pretty bearish. Could see it run at some point down towards the parity with the US dollars, where people are talking about. And if we're sitting at the moment on this level. I'll just put the cursor still for a moment. We're sitting on this 105.76 sort of area, which has been the sort of the low of the bodies a few times before, somewhere in that region. And it seems to be sitting at a bit of support there. However, if we start seeing it breaking down, well, the people, I'm sure, will be looking at parity at some point from a weekly perspective. Daily at the moment, still coming back to the dailies. I was hoping we was going to be pushing up this morning to the weekly pivot at least, and that itself may give a bit of a sell point. It's certainly a target at the moment for the potential, if any further potential upside today. The other thing to bear in mind is we've had 10 days selling off here. It's not unusual to get at least a partial up day following so many down days. I mean that might follow through a little bit. I mean, in terms of those looking to sell the euro again, it may be the best to wait until it gets towards the daily 8 if it doesn't set up anything in the shorter term frames beforehand. Okay, that's the euro. Looking at the pound. Let's look at the bigger picture first here. In the pound, again, it's put a pivot swing in these 3 candle pictures sitting here. Seeing a bit consolidated at the moment, starting the week off again. This picture certainly looks bearish, and again, we could be heading down towards that 1.2 sort of level again. If it pushes through over the week, we'll see. But in a quietly traded week, this could be one of those sort of inside weeks that we get from time to time. And looking at the data here, the chart here, and it's been sort of trying to sell off, and it's got its weekly pivot above. Would like to have seen that to hit again early this week, maybe today, tomorrow, if not today, and then I'd be more happy to be looking for the downside. Last week we got the downside from the trend line here. Let's just pop the trend line on from the current sort of pattern that we're seeing, and it's really now looking pretty much across there, where it's found a bit of support off it this morning, and well, maybe pushing back up there. But that's the sort of the line in the sand I have at the moment. Would I mean, it's below its daily 821's crossed here. Does look bearish, but would like to have seen the weekly pivot off before I sort of went heading south on it, but we'll see. Dollar yen, weekly point of view, another pivot swing for the upside, bullish pivot swing sort of sitting in there. Again though, I mean, it's getting pretty extreme on the RSI on the weekly basis, let alone anywhere else. In fact, I did check. Yeah, it's a bit overbought on my indicator as well. So on the weekly point of view, so it's getting there. Is it there on the daily? It's not really. It had come up earlier on that push up, but it's not quite there on the dailies. But certainly extreming on the RSI. It doesn't mean to say it won't continue up though, of course. What it does mean though is if it does get a correction back down, we could have a push back up for another surge up. Would like to see a correction from where it's sitting at the moment. Personally, slightly short. Not personally, actually. I've got a short position on the dollar yen at the moment. Looking to ride it back to the weekly pivot, maybe the daily 8. But it's a sort of one of those positions at the moment. It's just sort of searching around, trying to work its way out, or the market's certainly trying to work its way out in this shorter sort of movement. But it has diverged on the hourlies at the moment, so it's a short-term bit of divergence sitting there. It's whether or not it can actually break on down now. With the weekly overbought signal, generally you expect it to come back down to the sort of the weekly 21, but maybe a big ask in this current market with a strong dollar, but we'll see. For now though, looking, as I said, if it can continue to the downside here, looking for that daily 8, but may soon be stopped out. Aussie dollar, maybe fighting it a little bit too much. Oops, wrong button. There we go. Aussie dollar, again, another pivot swing. So bearish signal here on the weeklies. Short term, we're seeing a little bit of a push up here. It's trying. As I said last week, it's got this wedge in here, and it could see the depth of this wedge a little bit more to the downside. It's already broken the weekly 50, which we was talking about again earlier last week. That's already been broken. I was looking at it as a target, but it went well past it in the end, and it's got, as I say, potential for more downside from this weekly pattern. However, shorter term, intermediate term, click on the right button, it'll be good. There we go. We have got the weekly pivot above us, so it's got a chance of running up there. Again, it's that sort of price action that we're seeing here. You just think, well, it may just take a bit of a breather from this sell-off that it's seen quite sharp last week. Oil's looking a bit brighter, which may help it as well. The price of oil commodities may pop up a little bit, but I'm still looking at Chinese data, which isn't great, which again always tends to hit the Aussie dollar a lot more than anything else these days. So as I say, if it can push above that weekly pivot, well, it may have a bigger correction. But for now, I'm really just looking in the short time, waiting to see if that gets hit. The bigger picture does look relatively bearish on it. It may get up as far as its daily 8. There is the potential, but it's not looking great at the moment. Finally, then the Canadian dollar. Final currency pair. Well, last week didn't really lead to too much at all. It's very indecisive buy last week with the doji there. If anything, I'm looking at this thinking, well, if oil starts to keep on pushing up, maybe we'll see a bit more of a correction coming back in the Canadian dollar, back towards possibly the weekly 50 there. Looking at the pattern here, it's not looking great on it at the moment, and there is the potential lower high sort of sitting in. If it can start breaking through the daily 21, it would be a more bearish sort of pairing. At the moment though, it's as I say, holding. If any further push up and break, that is a sort of trend going across the top of those highs. If it breaks out, we'll just have to be bullish again on the dollar yen. But at the moment, I'm erring and waiting to see if it breaks this 21, and I'll be bearish again, back maybe towards the daily 50. If oil really gets a push on, we'll have a look at it. It could go further. Now, talking of oil, let's look at the weeklies first there. Good bullish engulfing almost, well, at least the actual bar reversal bar there. And we're seeing a bit of a push through this morning on comments coming out from OPEC. So the only thing is, I wonder how far oil will push up if there is an agreement made, whether it will push up much into the 50s anyway. It's pretty close to it. It may push up those prior highs there. So just looking at technical, there's resistance that sits around about that 52 mark, 51.80, 52. Certainly had resistance before. If you can push up there and break that this time, well, maybe it's got more legs and it will help maybe the US dollar, the Canadian dollar and the Aussie dollar a little bit more. Looking at the dailies here, and well, there is a gap. That's the only thing I've got here at the moment. Now, if that gap's a true gap, the risk is we always see those, often see those filled. It may not be immediate, but at some point. But at the moment it's pushing up, and it's pushing up reasonably solidly. So there is the potential for the monthly pivot to be hit yet. To the downside, we've got the weekly pivot. So any sell-off, well, that would certainly be a target I'd be looking at there. But at the moment, it looks like it could be heading on for that weekly pivot with the news that seems to be more positive than neutral coming out from OPEC, etc. So that's oil. I'll have a quick look at the Footsie. Almost rude not to these days. It's recovered a little bit this morning. This morning's recovered. It was looking a bit tired earlier on, but it's pushing up a little bit more, back up again now in this weekly chart here. Overall, to me, it just looks like a bit of a bear flag that's sort of putting in here on the weeklies, though. Nothing particularly strange. Strong rather about this. It does look rather weakish. And you see this wedge, certainly from a daily perspective, it does look like it could roll over back towards that the lows and maybe the monthly S3, the way it's sitting at the moment, but we'll see. Already through the weekly pivot, looking, as I say, a little bit more solid at the moment for today, but overall the bigger picture looks erring. We could see a bit downside. If we do that, we most likely see a bit of the pound going up a little bit maybe. And let's have a look at the US futures. The weekly picture first. So S&P is not quite done what the Dow's done, putting in new highs last week, but it is heading up towards that sort of zone now, and we could be pushing up. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the 2190 coming into play maybe before Thanksgiving at this rate. It's certainly pushing up there at the moment. Looking at dailies, well, it's running into these near-term highs. It's running to these near-term highs on Friday, but weekly pivot below that would maybe be, if it does get back to that weekly pivot, would be a buying point. But at the moment, it looks like it could be on for its monthly R3 if it can break that R2 level. There's nothing short-term here to stop it. So erring on the bullish side there as well, which suggests US dollar down a little bit and help the other markets a tad. Okay, that's pretty much it for me. I think I'm going to leave it there. Have a great week. I'll speak to you next week. Take care. Bye for now.